I actually want to meet somebody and share her story. Ergem Senyuva, she is absolutely incredible. Hello, Ergem. She brings her story to us from Turkey, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jonathan.
So I've watched several of your talks, and I absolutely love the passion that you bring to everything. And what I thought was the most fascinating is you didn't let anything get in your way. You didn't let anybody change your mind. In fact, from a very young age, you were moved about the climate crisis, mainly because of pollution in Istanbul. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. When I was growing up, I was born in Istanbul and raised in Istanbul. So I lived in Istanbul from late 70s to early 90s. And during this time, we didn't really talk about climate change because it wasn't apparent. But what was apparent in our lives was air pollution. I remember I was a very little girl going to school, and we used to wear aprons at the time with very white colors. And Turkey was using coal at the time for heating. And especially during winter time, our collars would have black soot and ash on them when we were coming back from school. They would be very clean in the morning and grayish in the afternoon. I also remember my mom taking me to a doctor when I had bronchitis. And the doctor used to say, you know, for her to get better, you need to take her outside to the forest or a mountainous area. Such was the air pollution that we were facing. And Istanbul is a beautiful city. It has actually grown in size in population by twofolds during 1980s to 2000s. And we've actually, with this industrialization, small and medium size around the city, and with the reliance on fossil fuels, we witnessed not only air pollution, but we also witnessed sea pollution, environmental degradation. I remember as a child walking by the Straits of the Bosphorus, and from the European side, we would look at the Anatolian side. And day in, day out, we would see these trees being cut. And it was actually quite sad. And the beautiful pine trees and the forests of Istanbul was disappearing in front of our eyes. Yeah. And buildings were sprawling like mushrooms. And it actually took a toll on me. And I actually vowed at the time that I wanted to do something towards this. But I just didn't know what it was.
And that's the incredible thing, too, because some people don't feel like one person can make a change, one person can do anything, and it couldn't be anything from the truth. We encourage people to become an advocate in their community, to spread the word, to understand climate change, because really education is the most important thing. I think people do want to do good. And in fact, you found yourself, because you had lived in the States, you worked in finance for a while. What was it that inspired you to move back to Istanbul and become a climate leader?
It actually, while I was working in the field of finance, I was actually getting exposure to renewable energy funds. And it sparked something. I wanted to learn further about them. Clearly, there was this change in our attitudes towards financing, towards disruptive technologies, towards clean energy, and a willingness to rely less on fossil fuels. I wanted to move to Turkey in 2006 because Turkey was growing, and I never lived in Turkey before. As an adult, I left Istanbul around the age of 18. So when I moved back to Turkey in 2006 with a background in finance, the first thing that I did was actually get into renewable energy development on solar energies. And what I realized that Turkey was actually very ready for solar energy development and for alternative renewable energy sources. But it just was not happening because of the reasons that were mainly due to legislation and lack of policy. I remember going to the government in Ankara and talking about what is Turkey's stand on renewable energy policy with the government before COP15 in Copenhagen. And it seemed like the government was not ready at the time to make a big change. They were getting there. They realized the importance, but they weren't ready in terms of the necessary changes from a business point of view. When I spoke to businesses, I saw that they were ready, but they found that there wasn't enough policy and legislation to give them the enough support. So I actually found that there was a lot of need for this, but it wasn't happening. And at the time, I watched The Inconvenient Truth. I think that was a big turning point because I saw the risks, but also opportunities. And I said, why don't we talk about these opportunities in Turkey? Because from my childhood, not much has changed to 2006, because we still were not investing in clean energy. We still were actually, yes, we weren't using coal as much, but we were still subsidizing coal. We were still using natural gas as a resource and lignite, and heavily reliant on fossil fuels for energy. Yeah. And so I wanted to become a climate leader to make that change, to be more empowered to actually galvanize that change in Turkey.
And that's all that Turkey
and
needed.
I remember going to
Turkey just needed an Ergem to come down there and give a little nudge and show people in the right direction, because nothing happens overnight, but it's nice to see the steps slowly moving forward. And I've traveled to Istanbul. I was in Turkey just 2 years ago, one of the most beautiful cities, and the people were so kind and so charming, and I love seeing my two loves come together. I'm a big advocate for travel to experience other cultures, but also seeing what you're doing there is incredible. And in fact, you started the very first green guide called Yesilist. Explain to everybody exactly what that is.
Absolutely, thank you. Yesilist is actually Turkey's first green guide and sustainable living platform. There are several reasons why we wanted to fund this, but in 2006, a little after I'm moving to Turkey, I had my daughter. And as a young mother, I was looking for organic, sustainable products and services. Through a bit of research, I found out that 80% of everything that was being produced in Turkey was being exported due to lack of local demand. When I went to the businesses, I realized they were there. They just couldn't reach the consumer. And when I talked to businesses, they were ready to make that change towards the right mix of energy, the right mix of products, but they didn't know if the consumer existed. So when I talked to the government wanted to do something, but they weren't sure the impacts of that on the business side of it, the sustainability being a cost center issue, as opposed to it could be a revenue issue. So I founded Yesilist in 2010 as Turkey's first sustainable living platform to align everyone, partner everyone around this issue. And it became a trusted source in a very short period of time. Today we reach about 1.5 million people offline and online through workshops, seminars, behavior change campaigns, and creating original content for Turkey daily. And through these, we've witnessed that so much change is happening, and we're really proud to be part of this.
It's interesting because I thought I was busy. You are one of the busiest women I think I have ever met. You always have something on the go. Your talks are amazing. Working with Yesilist, you had mentioned that seeing An Inconvenient Truth was really a turning point, as well as I'm sure becoming a mother was very important to make sure that you're turning over a planet that's going to be healthy for your child. Is there one single moment that sticks out in your mind that just helped reinforce your decision to devote your life to this?
I think there are several different turning points. The first year, right after I became a climate leader, I gave about 70 talks throughout that year, almost 5 or 6 talks every week, every month. And those talks were actually quite interesting. On one level, a lot of people I've spoken to, every time I talked about climate crisis and how they could be part of the solution, it seemed a lot of people were not aware that those solutions existed in Turkey. And talking about that, especially with businesses and young people, opened my eyes to the fact that there is a lot of change that is needed. It's just a matter of getting that across. But one turning point was, I remember partnering with a women's organization in southern Anatolia about women empowerment and climate change. As you know, women are actually threatened by climate change and they're very vulnerable. And when I was speaking to in a very rural area, after my speech, a woman came by and she asked me if wind energy was going to give her husband more cancer. And I said, on the contrary, unfortunately, it's actually very clean and it doesn't emit carbon dioxide. It turned out that her family actually lived in a village where they were living next to a coal plant, and a lot of people in the village had respiratory problems and lung cancer. Of course, I wouldn't want to draw that link immediately, but she made that link. And she said, so renewable energy is good for us. And I kept I kept telling her that this would be very clean and healthy for her, her family, her village. And she got my telephone number and she left. Months later, one day, I received a call from her. And she said, she talked to the local authorities because there was a company who wanted to build a wind energy plant, and an opinion leader from the village was saying this is going to give everyone cancer. And she advocated against that. And not only that, understanding the importance of forestation, she planted trees on an old coal mine, which was actually closed, about 200 trees with her village. It's a very small drop in the ocean, but a big one, because once you empower a woman, then you empower her family and her whole village. Yeah. And I think this was something that convinced me and touched me deeply, and I realized I was on the right track.
Yeah, and that's what I think inspires me, because I hear stories like that, and somebody who is new to understanding the climate crisis and they want to tackle it in some small way. And I think misinformation is what throws off a lot of people, because they just don't understand what they can do. What do you think in Turkey the public perception in general is about the climate crisis and the solutions that Turkey's actually working toward? And what do you think the biggest challenge is in educating people so that you can change their mindset?
I think people in Turkey are aware that there is the climate crisis, there is a climate change. The climate change is actually a very difficult concept to grasp for a lot of people, because they don't necessarily feel the effects of it directly during their everyday lives, although they feel it in terms of the agriculture or their livelihoods, the food crisis, and a lot of other ways. However, it's not that direct link. Nevertheless, people are very aware of it, and I think they realize that there must be solutions. And Turkey has been actually has come a very long way, and there is a lot of potential for this. And the needs for clean energy is there, and the government is trying to put the right policies. We see it. It's moving up on the agenda bit by bit over the course of the years, which is very good news. Yeah. For this to happen, actually, for a conversion to happen, it's about a business case. We have to have not only the government and the business have to see the opportunities that lie ahead with this, and actually they do. In a few years ago, solar energy developments were allowed in Turkey, and the government put a cap about 600 megawatts, and there were about 9,600 licenses applied for 600 megawatt allocation, exactly 16 times of what was originally allocated. That shows the interest from the business side. Yeah. And it's up to the government now to actually match that.
Yeah, and I think it's all baby steps, and yourself, you're one of our advocates who I think is helping educate not just people in general, but also the government. If you had to say right now one thing, the most important thing, what would you say is the clearest path forward for change in Turkey?
The clearest path is probably, again, the lack of legislation had been a very big problem for governments, and this has to happen, and it has to happen in all aspects. It's very clear that government has to move climate change up its agenda, it has not been something that has been highly ranked until now. I mean, we realize that there are a lot of problems that our country is facing. However, they're not mutually exclusive, and climate change is something that has to be tackled because it is actually affecting the future of the country. And this is very serious. And for that to happen, actually, we need the international support. I know that we've just signed the Paris Agreement. We are very optimistic about it, and it's very promising. It's a matter of aligning everyone and seeing those partnerships work. Yeah. And with the lack of partnerships, nothing is going to work. And I know that business is ready, and the government is getting there. And it's just everyone trying to do their bit by bit, and not hide behind the excuse that we are a developing nation. Growth can happen in the right way. It's just a matter of us pursuing it.
There's enough research out there showing that it is the right decision and it does help an economy, and you are definitely doing your bit. So thank you so much. Thank you for everything that you do and continue to do, and hopefully we talk again soon.